opening weekend at Keeneland is upon us. Recording this on Thursday night, so we actually have not had opening day yet by the time we are talking here. And the we is me, Gino Bacola, and my good friend Christopher Larmey, who we have had on That's What G Said podcast and different forms of live streams and video streams through the years. And Chris is one of my favorite people to talk racing with because he's an excellent handicapper, and he's also someone who's always looking to find value and very, very sharp. Chris hosts a couple podcasts himself. He's done a lot of work for contest players through the years. And Chris, I always like to bring you in on the big days and pick your brain a little bit. What a cool Saturday this is. We have 3 big days at 3 different racetracks. So if you can't find something you like at Santa Anita, Aqueduct, or Keeneland, you're doing something wrong. There's plenty of opportunities out there on Saturday.
Yeah, it's almost too much. I mean,
it is.
It's a embarrassment of riches. I wish they'd spread it out a little bit, but it is. Everybody wants to time these Triple Crown preps, to be ideal to head into the Derby. So here we are with 3 major, Derby preps all on the same day.
And we'll be taking a look at the Keeneland Saturday Pick 5. It's an all-graded stakes Pick 5 that finishes up in the bluegrass. So not only is it really quality racing, but we will see horses that are trying to get some points to get into the Kentucky Derby next month. So it's a very important weekend with 3 different prep races all around: the Santa Anita Derby, the Wood Memorial, and at Keeneland with the bluegrass. So, Chris, I'm glad that they put an all stakes Pick 5 together like this. It's actually in the middle of the card, and we really get to try to sink our teeth into the best quality racing on this Saturday card at Keeneland. There's always going to be great cards at Keeneland, and we'll have the privilege of diving into the DRF past performances here. I'm a big Formulator fan, so if anyone ever needs any help handicapping the races, I'd always recommend DRF Formulator. Makes it so easy to watch the replays and click on the charts, and then you have pedigree information, owner, trainer, stats, everything you need. Chris, let's talk about the Commonwealth, and let's talk about race number 5, which kicks off this all stakes Pick 5. Glancing through this field, doesn't seem like there's a ton of early speed in this race for like a 7 furlong sprint graded stakes like this.
Totally agree. It looks like there's no speed at all. And I think an aggressive ride would be very advantageous in this race.
Yeah. And then you'll have some horses that are, cutting back a little bit. The one to me that it won't necessarily be the biggest price in the world, but a couple things just jump off the page when I was looking at Run Classic, in that he really does look like a horse who has some distance limitations. When you just watch his races and you just look at the past performances, he's usually in a really nice spot. He's tracking, he's stalking, and then turning for home. He's right in contention, and he just doesn't have quite enough. He tries hard, but I just don't know how far he wants to go. And his career best race was a 7 furlong sprint at Keeneland. He earned a big speed figure in doing so. He sat a really nice trip. I'd love to see him aggressively handled in here. And I think he's going to be a major player in this race. So what'd you think about him, and then others that you may be looking at?
Well, we're on the same page. I for all the reasons you said, I always like horses cutting back that have speed. Totally agree with you. He's probably a sprinter. 7 furlongs should be perfect. He's run well at Keeneland. There's no pace in the race. He drew well, and from a post position standpoint. So absolutely, I think he's the most likely winner. And since he's not the favorite, he's the kind of horse you could lean on in the Pick 5. I'm not sure you'll get a lot of value in the win pool, but as a Pick 5, we're talking about the sequence, and it is the start of the Pick 5. He seems like a good place, to start. And I think there's a couple of price horses you can maybe hook him up with in this race as well.
Yeah. I completely agree. He would be, if I'm playing multiple tickets, he would be a horse I'd be fine taking a single with right off the bat on one, and then using him, like you said, and maybe a couple other prices along the way. Who are some of the other horses in here that would be on your radar that you might want to include in a Pick 5?
Well, Nakatomi, I think, will be overbet. I don't really think he's any better than many of these. So, I'm certainly against him, which might create some value in like the exactas. And to me, Heart Rhythm, the 4-horse, and Hear My Song, the 9, both have run well at Keeneland before. Both have some numbers that fit with these horses. And there's no reason why they couldn't, maybe run second to Run Classic at a big price. Even the one horse Hoist the Gold
Yeah.
is one that might be forwardly placed and from the rail there.
Now cuts
And
back.
he cuts back. He really is a sprinter. They were just trying something there, and he has a really nice workout since. So, those three, try to beat the favorites, Nakatomi, and get her number, and, get one of these price horses underneath. That might be the way to play it if you like to play, verticals. But in
Yeah.
the horizontals, I'd lean on Run Classic probably.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just been sort of waiting for this kind of a spot for him, as it's just got to be when you have a horse like this and you're an owner or a trainer of this horse. He's really talented, and he's so close to being able to go a little bit longer that it's kind of a tease. You want to keep trying and hoping that maybe he'll catch the right type of a group or the right pace shape. But I really think this is going to be like just a top level spot for him in here for Run Classic. So yeah, maybe a nice spot to lean on right away with Run Classic. Me and Chris were both looking at that. Only horse that we haven't really mentioned at all that I might throw in if I was using a price would be Pro Occident, who we talked about how there's not that much speed in this race. Pro Occident has been forwardly placed, going 6 in the last 2 races. They weren't going all that fast last time out, but I don't think he'll have to be too far out of it. And he also was a very impressive winner at 7 in his debut. If you're looking for some price horses underneath or another one to throw in, I didn't mind the 8 Pro Occident. As we finish up with the 5th race, anything else to mention on here, Chris, before we move along?
Well, the only other thing, I mean, if you're going to play the verticals, and I would maybe include the 10 long range Toddy. He's 30-1. He does have some speed. He has a little back class, and Junior Alvarado is not always the most aggressive rider, but if he is, and he could be one that's forwardly placed at a big price. So that's
sort of
the other one.
By post even.
Yeah, maybe.
From way out there, they even just say, hey, we're way outside. Let's just try to get as aggressive so we're not hooked as wide. And the race that he comes out of has come back very live so far. We've seen Last Samurai, West Will Power, and Law Professor all come back to win their next starts. West Will Power won the New Orleans over at Fairgrounds and earned 109 buyer speed figure, beating Art Collector that day. So the race has come back very, very strong. That one exits also.
Yeah, and he's run well at, he had no chance going 2 turns, so that was a toss. In the sloppy track race, he didn't run well, but his last time at Keeneland in a grade 2, he was only beating a neck.
Yep.
So, and he was up near the lead in what was probably just as good a field or better than this, given a grade 2. So, he's not impossible, and if he's anything close to 30-1, it's hard to leave him out if you're going to play some exactas. Say if you do Run Classic, he's one that you might want to use.
That is the start of that all stakes pick 5. It is race number 5 on Saturday at Keeneland. We'll move to race number 6, which is the second leg of the pick 5. It's the grade 2 Appalachian, and it'll be a mile on the turf for 3-year-old fillies. Some of the horses in here who will likely take a good amount of support. The 3 Cairo Consort has been a very honest filly. She was 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf behind Pleasant Passage, who will also be in this race. She is the 5-2 morning line favorite. She'll be making her first start of the year, and her first start since she was 2nd as a 2-year-old in the Juvenile Fillies Turf. So, Chris, from a wagering standpoint, those 2 will probably be, the top tier of betting choices. You have the more recently raced Cairo Consort, and then you have Pleasant Passage, who beat Cairo Consort, but we haven't seen in quite some time. And maybe this horse is the type that you play against and needs a race. Or do you think she's just better than this group? How are you seeing it?
Well, between the 2, Cairo Consort and Pleasant Passage, I would prefer Pleasant Passage. I think she's a better horse. But you're right. They probably have big plans for this horse, although people like to win graded stakes races at Keeneland. So my guess is, she's
ready to fire a big one at least.
Probably at least run as well as she was doing as a 2-year-old. She probably will have some forward and move, maybe her next out, but I think she'll run well. But she won't be any value. And there's a horse in here, actually a couple I think are alternatives that you could consider. And the one I really like It's just inside of Pleasant Passage. The 6-horse Be Your Best.
Sure.
She comes out of the Breeders' Cup, and she was actually the horse I bet in the Breeders' Cup betting challenge, and it was her race was kind of representative of my Breeders' Cup. She had an absolutely horrific trip. She got caught in traffic on the turn,
So
could
as you're
not get
talking,
out.
she's the 6. I'm going to pull up the race and we can watch it a little bit as you talk. But
Okay.
yeah, she's the 6 in this race we're watching. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
you might want to run it up to like, I don't know if you can fast forward, but run
Yep.
it up to where they're on the turn, and you'll
Yep.
see her buried in there, and
There's
you'll
nowhere to go
see,
on both sides. She's
yeah,
surrounded. She can't get out. She can't get in. And the horses in front of her just keep backing up. So she just has no chance.
right here you'll see her completely check out of it right now, and that was the end of her race, right? But she had a lot of horse, and finally she gets in the clear, but it's way too late. I think she has been beaten twice by Pleasant Passage, but one of them was that race where Pleasant Passage had a clear trip and she didn't, and the other time was on a yielding track. So, yeah, I thought she was good enough to play in the Breeders' Cup last year and beat Pleasant Passage. So I certainly think she's worth a play now, and she will be a pretty good price.
Mm-hmm.
And she gets Luis Saez, who I hope will be a little more aggressive than her rider was in the Breeders' Cup. And if she gets a good trip, there's no reason why she couldn't win at a price. So
Yeah.
I like her quite a bit.
Be Your Best. I think I'm going to make sure that in the pick 5, I have the 9 on the ticket just in case she's the type of filly who can run away and hide with this group. I really don't know how good the group she's been beating are, but they've been a little more aggressive with her. She's drawn to the outside, and you start going through this field horse by horse. There's not that much speed. Like we've seen Pleasant Passage and Sabalenka show some speed in races. I think Well Into is faster than those for sure. And you kind of keep diving through, and all of a sudden you're like, Alphabella probably sits close. Heavenly Sunday can really sit close. Cairo Consort is pretty versatile. And oh yeah, the 9 might have a chance to sneak away in here. So I just want to make sure. I think there are versions of this race where she could get clear and make that 3 in a row. She's on the ticket for me. And then a couple horses that might be intriguing, depending on how you're playing the race down towards the inside. The one comes in from Fairgrounds. The race was fine last time out. It wasn't bad. This horse should offer you some nice value and be able to save ground. Then you have the 2 Papilio. And both Papilio and Cairo Consort come out of the same race. And they both sort of had some legitimate excuses. They went really slow in that race, and Papilio was hooked about 4 wide throughout. Cairo Consort was even farther back and was hooked pretty wide, and they both kept trying. The Cairo Consort's really honest. She's just always going to be like an undervalued horse. She's never going to be like a fun, sexy horse to be betting, but she really does try. I was kind of impressed with that last race, even more than the race where she had a bunch of trouble and then came running, because the last race she was wide and just kind of kept grinding. So she's tough. I think this is a fun race, Chris, and I don't think the 7 is necessarily like a slam dunk in here off the bench. So my approach will probably be to use 3 or 4 and hope Pleasant Passage isn't quite up to her best. And Be Your Best is definitely on them, because if someone's watching and wondering, so why would you maybe play Be Your Best and not Pleasant Passage? It really all comes down to the price. If Be Your Best, who's had legitimate trouble that we've seen, and you can make, as you did, legitimate excuses for why Pleasant Passage got the better of her a couple times. Well, now if they're both coming off the bench and one of them is going to be 4 times the price of the other one, I don't knock. You have less knocks for horses when they're bigger prices because it's built into their price.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to graduate from being, you want to go to the next level, you have to understand that being a good horse player is not about picking the winner. It's about finding value. And, the only way you can make money or improve your results long term is playing horses that have the price that's higher than you think they should be, and never play a horse that is a price that's lower than you think it should be. And Pleasant Passage maybe is just as likely or more likely to win than Be Your Best, but definitely from a value standpoint, you're not going to make a lot of money long term playing a horse like that. Whereas Be Your Best, that's the sort of horse you can actually make money long term if you play those kinds of horses. So you have to learn that. That's part of what in my new
Your new
podcast.
pod, right? Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say that's a perfect way to plug it. Go talk a little bit about that show.
yeah, because I'll use a golf analogy since we're in the middle of the Masters right now. In golf, everybody wants to be able to hit that long ball off the tee, right? Drive it down the fairway, pull out the big dog, give it a whack. You spend a lot of time and money buying a fancy driver and practicing on the driving range, and maybe even get some good irons and get where you can stick the irons. And you get on the golf course and you make a good drive and you hit a good iron and you get it in close, and then you blow the putt and you don't cash it in. You waste your good drive and your good iron. Um, to me, so you need that long game, but that's not where you make the money. The difference between a good golfer and a great golfer, or an average golfer and a good golfer, is their short game. It's how good they can chip, in particular how good they can putt, so they can cash in on those good shots they make from tee to green. And betting horses is exactly the same. Everybody wants to pick winners and handicap the races, and you have to be good at that. But you also have to be able to cash it in, and to do that, you need to know how to bet. And right now, in the betting world, you get inundated with picks, and there's quite a bit of information around handicapping, like what we're doing right now, but very little about betting, and it's just as important, and in some of the more exotic wagers, probably more so than the handicapping. And so,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm trying to address, with some new content with the bet with the best podcast, is get some, really smart, articulate horse players that have had long-term success talk to you about how they approach the betting side, and how you improve that short game so you can cash in a good opinion. And this is a great example where, if you're going to bet, think about it from a betting perspective. You don't want to just focus in on a short price favorite, even though that might be the most likely winner and your best chance to cash. It's not your best chance to make money.
It's yeah, it's not always, at the highest levels of everything, it's not always the biggest gaps between the pros and the best of the best and then that the next groupings right below them. It just is the difference between, like you said, cashing it, finishing the job, like having the right opinion, but how do you take advantage of it and making the most money out of it? Is it the pick four? Is it playing in different ways, pick five, whatever you're doing? But I know one way you're not is betting a lot of chalk and horses that you don't love as chalk, right? That's the key. If you love a horse and they're a favorite, okay, and you don't think they're worth beating, don't waste your money. Don't play something else. But it's when we all talk about playing a little bit scared, throwing the horses in that you don't like, trying to play it a little bit too safe. You start wasting money here and there, and it's just never a long-term recipe. And I've enjoyed listening to a couple. You've had how many so far of the episodes of the new podcast?
We had two. I
Two,
started with
right?
Marshall
Okay,
Graham
perfect.
and
I thought
Tommy
those were the
Mass.
only two.
Yeah, and Tommy Mass is the most recent. And then tomorrow I'm going to record one with Matt Miller, another really
Nice.
sharp, articulate guy. Um, and it's different than it's sort of evergreen content. So if you want to try to improve your game, learn how to put it into the cup once you get it to the green. Cash in on your opinion, maximize your opinion. That's the podcast for you. I don't think there's anything quite like it out there. In fact, I'm sure there isn't. And so I encourage people to do that. They can follow me on Twitter on Derby159 and 2, and I tweet out links to the shows. And so please give it a listen if you're interested.
Well, yeah, that was a perfect place for us to talk a little bit about that and plug that as we move into the Grade 1 Madison, the middle part of this pick five, with a heavy favorite on the morning line, your Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint winner, Good Night Olive, who has won 6 consecutive races. Her only defeat was in her career debut when she finished second. She's won every race since. She's won back-to-back grade ones. She won the Breeders' Cup going 7 furlongs over this course at Keeneland, but we haven't seen her since November now. So, like some of these horses that are coming off the bench at a short price, you do always wonder, what will it be like for her? But she did prove herself. Like even last year when she started the year, she won from a layoff of November to June, even a little bit longer than the one she's dealing with now. She won going 7 furlongs really impressively at Belmont. What do you do in this race, Chris? How do you approach it with Goodnight Olive?
Well, you make it sound like she can't be beat. Um, but
She's got an imposing resume,
she
but this is the
does.
time to try to beat a horse like this, making their first start back when you just don't know if she's going to be as cranked up, as she would be at the end of the year. And honestly, there are a couple like legitimate fast horses and like quality filly, sharp horses in this race. Like Society was 4-1 in the Breeders' Cup last year. This horse has won 5 of 7 and is really quick. Ujiri is also in pretty nice form and is very quick also. So these are horses that are honest. How about Mary Quite Contrary, who's been kind of racing at a cut below levels, but she's won 6 of her 7 races. It's really tough to knock her overall form. So it's not the biggest field in the world, and she is very, very good on paper, but I think there's some quality with these horses lined up next to her. Can she be beat? How are you seeing it?
Well, yeah, and she will be heavily bet for all the reasons you said. I mean, she'll be 1-5, and that means if you can beat her in the pick 5, you create lots of value. So these are always the kind where I like to try to take a shot.
Me too.
And keep in mind, she was the best sprinter last year, but that was a terrible group of sprinters last year. They were just terrible. I mean, she was the best of a bad lot. She's a good horse, but she's winning these races easily because there just wasn't any competition. Whereas Society was a 3-year-old in a crop of really tough older mares. I mean, that
Think
was a
about
stacked division.
If she ran in the filly and mare sprint,
Should have
she
been the
would have
favorite.
I completely agree.
And she should be the favorite in here. She should be the favorite in here. Yeah.
She would have been favored, I think, over Goodnight Olive. I completely agree. And
yeah,
I'm trying to beat Goodnight Olive, and I think you have a couple opportunities. And I keep talking about Society, Chris.
Well, I just think, Malathot, Clariere, Secret Oath, all these horses that she was going up against. And, she was trying to stretch out her speed, and, maybe she's just better sprinting. She certainly has run well at 7 furlongs in the past. And I think she's got a lot more upside than Goodnight Olive, and I think she's just as good, if not better, already. So to me, she's the most likely winner, and she's great value, not because she's going to be a big price, but if you want to play the pick 5 and you can knock out Good Olive, she's only going to be 3-1 maybe in the race, but she'll be maybe 10-1. It might be 90% of the money going through, or 80% of the money going through Goodnight Olive. So to me, you single Society, try to beat Goodnight Olive. That's the way to play the pick 5.
Yeah, I think the same thing. And depending on if you're out there playing and you're looking at this race differently to approach, I think the 2 horses to the outside are a cut below them, Chris. I want to try to make a case for them. I don't think I can get there, but like Ujiri's last 2 races are good. And what I like about her is she's actually won going a mile in a 16th. So she's also shown she can sit off a little bit if she has to. And then Mary Quite Contrary, she stepped up and proved she can compete with Graded Stakes Company. I just don't know how strong the company they've been keeping is to come and knock heads with Society and Goodnight Olive, who are both real quality. Like, these were 2 of the top fillies and mares last year, like overall. I mean, Society was 4-1 in the distaff, and Goodnight Olive was favored in the sprint. Like, Society was the 3rd choice in that race, as you said, in a loaded distaff with Malathot, Clariere, and Nest in that group.
Yeah, I mean, she was just knocking heads with much better horses. I think she's the best horse in the race. I do think the 2 favorites are a cut above the others, but I think you could make a case that if Society and Ujiri go slow early and then get some separation late, they might be able to hold. Maybe Ujiri can hold on for second, and you could get an exacta, with Goodnight Olive out. It's still not going to pay a lot in this small field, but if you really want to play verticals, that might be the way to go. But in the picks, I would just single Society.
It's the grade 1 Madison. We both feel like Society has a chance to just run them off their feet in here. Society, very, very quality filly. She'll be making her 2023 debut along with Goodnight Olive. First start at 4 for Society. First start at 5 for Goodnight Olive. Let's move to a turf sprint. 5.5 furlongs. It's the grade 2 Shakertown. And these are fun trip races, if you're one of those trip handicappers that likes to watch replays, because you'll generally see a lot of horses who have had some troubled trips, or horses you can make cases for and against based on the trips they've recently received. The horse who I want to start with from a talking standpoint that's definitely on the radar for me, Chris, is the number 5, Mr. Who's just really good overall form, and the turf sprint form is excellent. This is a horse who's been on the turf 5 times, and if you look at the last 3 turf races, they're open length victories. They're extremely impressive. The one at Fairgrounds last time out earned a really big Beyer speed figure in doing so. But this is a horse who's actually kind of classy on the dirt too. And so there are other speed figures. So it's not just like a real outlier for that one. I think there is some just real talent with this horse. I like the versatility. He's got some speed. He can sit. He had a good start. He just kind of settled behind the leaders and he stayed out of traffic. He seems a little bit handy to me too. So he's in the mix for me. For sure, Mr. M. Probably a couple others in here, but I know my one approach. I'm playing against Caravel. I'm going to let Caravel beat me in here. Her form heading into the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint wasn't up to snuff with the best of the turf sprinters. She was 43-1 that day. She's a filly, now a mare, and was facing the boys. And when I see a speed figure that it seems to me like that one is a bit of an outlier, I'm going to see if she can pull it right back again and prove it, especially coming off the bench. So my approach from this race is going to be no Caravel. I like the 5 and a couple others. Tell me who are some of the others I need to use?
Well, I don't disagree with you. Caravel is good, but she just got a dream trip in the Breeders' Cup. And she is coming off the layoff, and she's not even getting a weight break now against the boys in here. So, and she'll be, the big favorite. So I'm with you there, Mr. I like him too. Like you said, he's done really well recently in turf sprints, and he has a good workout since his last. So nothing not to like there. If you can get 6-1, that's value. I think the most likely winner is another horse I played in the Breeders' Cup and didn't work out too well, and that's the 12 horse, Arrest Me Red. Mm-hmm. He has a habit of becoming a hot, washy mess before the race. So we won't know that heading into the pick 5, but that's something worth looking at before the race. If he's really washed out before the race, that's not a good sign. Sometimes he waits to wash out until he starts heading towards the starting gate. That's what happened in the Breeders' Cup, but he still runs pretty good even when he's washed out, but it uses a lot of energy, and he didn't get a good trip. He got parked wide in that Breeders' Cup. They didn't get an aggressive ride. He kind of washed out early. This time he draws outside with Rosario. He's got tactical speed. I think Rosario gives him a smart ride. He could end up tucking in behind some, the early front runners.
And that race will just give him, because the race he didn't get a good trip and it's just a poor finish on paper, you'll get a little value built in with him because that, like if he just didn't run in the Breeders' Cup and you're playing him off of the September race, he'd be a shorter price. But even though he ran in the Breeders' Cup against tougher, some people might dismiss him a little bit off of that. And I think he's in trying to beat Caravel, he's absolutely one of the horses I'm using.
Yeah. And like you said, it's all about price. At 9-2, he's really good value. I don't know if, Wesley Ward horse at Keeneland is going to go off at 9-2. I'd be a little surprised if you get that price, so he may not be a good win bet, but he's the one I'll lean on the most in the pick 5, and Mr. Is one I would definitely use and consider playing him if he's 6-1 or higher, as well. And then the other long shot I like in here is the 10 horse Oceanic. He's a little inconsistent, but his good races are pretty good and definitely good enough to at least hit the board. And he'll probably be a big price. He probably will be at that 15-1 in the morning line. So, he's another one I would use, especially in the verticals.
Yeah, you just eliminate his Breeders' Cup race last year, and he put together back-to-back races at Colonial, and then he came over to Keeneland, and he showed it was good. He was the runner-up behind Golden Pal, and he finished in front of a horse who's a player in here, like the 3, Artemis City Limits. He was finished in front of that horse if you're just playing, the like the measuring stick game, and Artemis City Limits was fifth in the Breeders' Cup, was only beaten a couple lengths. The other one I would like to mention in here is the 9, Bad Beat Brian. So if you get to Bad Beat Brian last year, where, he's winning at Kentucky, he's coming right back in the Woodford and being really competitive in that race. We're talking Oceanic and Artemis City Limits, and he's right there behind Golden Pal with them, with a little bit of traffic, with a really nice speed figure that would fit. And then since then, he has 3 races on the synthetic, and they're not bad. He's just obviously a better turf horse. They were at Turfway, and they were decent enough to give him one more shot and then one more shot. But now they get back to the turf, and he's a little bit sneaky, at least as an under horse, because we know he's got some speed. He can also pass horses that he's shown. I could see him. It's all about the trips that you're getting, Chris, but because he's got a little muddied up form off of 3 synthetic races, he's probably a little bit better value than maybe his actual chances of winning this race.
Yeah, I always like it when they have 3 straight races with obvious excuses like that, where they're on the wrong surface and now they're back where he belongs.
Yep.
I'm not sure he's quite good enough, but
yeah, he may not be. He might be a couple low.
But
will
he's
be
the kind
in.
of horse. Yeah, you're looking for value, and a lot of times that muddied up form, you're going to get he's going to be a better price than he should be. But I think his chance of winning are pretty low. Although hitting the board, underneath, I could see that.
I'm glad you mentioned Oceanic. Also, a race where we're both, again, looking to toss a favorite that we think is beatable. And we see a few of these this weekend, horses that are starting their year. And keep in mind, horses that are starting their year that are at short prices, are they trying to be 100% cranked up and ready this weekend? Maybe some of them are, because like you said, people like to win at Keeneland, or they're showing up in big races, but they still may be at a B plus or a B level. And this might be a fun time to try to beat some of these horses in their first start back, because they may be prepping for a month from now for a big race on Derby and Oaks weekend. And that might be where some of these horses are better, making their second start back. So we do see Caravel as your heavy favorite on the morning line in the Shaker Town. Chris, let's finish up the pick 5 with the Bluegrass as we get to one of the 3 Kentucky Derby prep races this weekend. It is a grade 1, and there are Derby points on the line. The morning line favorite in here is Tappet Trice, was your Tampa Bay Derby winner. He has won 3 in a row, won pretty nicely at Gulfstream back in February, and then the Tampa race was just kind of weird. He was way out of it, and he really kind of kicked into stride late. Not sure how strong the race was. The figure didn't come back all that strong for him. He and Verifying are sort of your top 2 choices, and probably the 2 that'll maybe be like a tier above on the in the wagering for most of them. The 6 or the 8 Blazing Sevens wasn't all that impressive last time. I'm kind of curious how he'll get bet in this race. But Chris, let's talk about the Bluegrass. So of the major players kind of starting, who do you think's the horse to beat in this race?
Well, first of all, I think Tappet Trice is the most overrated 3-year-old in the country, and I think he'll be a big favorite in here, just based on the future wagering. He was much lower priced than Verifying, so I'll be shocked if Verifying is. I think Tappet Trice could be even money. I might be exaggerating a bit, but I don't like him at all in here. He's the kind of horse you love to bet against. He always makes it tough on himself. He's by Tappet, and they never get smart. They're always stupid, and they certainly don't get better as 3-year-olds mentally. And he draws an inside post. He's probably going to end up getting shuffled all the way to the back of the pack and have to run everybody down. And
short stretch, and there's not a lot of speed on paper early in this race. Maybe 2 or 3 horses. There's not a ton of early speed here.
No, and so he's a big underlay, so I'm definitely against him. Verifying, I'm kind of ambivalent. He just hasn't really run well lately, but he has some upside and he's got some speed. So
I just didn't love. I really didn't like his trip that much last time. I thought there, I just didn't think he was handled very aggressively. He just sort of waited, and then spots kept closing on him, and he kept getting shuffled back. I I'm glad I'm glad to see a jock change, just because I think it'll mean they're going to get a little bit more aggressive, because I don't think he wants to come from way out of it. I don't think he needs the lead. He could be fine sitting just behind, but I figure he's going to be more aggressive. It'll probably be what him. We have Major Blue, who was setting the pace going 5.5 last time out. So he got the lead in a legit sprint race. He's pretty quick. I'd imagine he probably gets the lead, and then maybe, Verifying tries to carve it out right behind him. I could see even the outside horse maybe trying to get more forwardly placed, but there's really not that much pace.
No, and that's why Verifying is a little dangerous. Lucas usually sends his horses, so I do think it'll be an honest pace, but Verifying can sit off of that horse and then get the jump on everybody.
Yeah.
He might be able to win the race. But he's not going to be a great price, and but I am a little bit concerned that he might get the right trip. But
yeah,
to me,
I mean, of the short prices, I definitely prefer him over Tapit Trice. Like, I'm not using Tapit Trice. The way that we're talking this pick 5 out, I'm going to be tossing enough of the favorites earlier on that Verifying is okay for me to have on my ticket here, because I do think, like you said, he could get a really nice trip in here, and he may not be a horse I bet in the Derby, but in this particular race, in a race where he does need the points also to get into the Derby, so they are going to try to win this race. Or, Brad Cox has a ton of horses. He picks out spots all over. He could have gone a bunch of different ways with this horse, and they show up here. Like, I do think he's really well meant, and of the short prices, I probably won't be chucking him. But you and I are looking for much more fun horses to sink our teeth into and to bet from a wagering standpoint. So who are some of those horses that are on your radar?
Well, the one I like the most is one thing to keep in mind about Keeneland. There's certain trainers that really do well at Keeneland. One of those is Ken McPeak. His horses always run well on this Keeneland spring meet. And the horse I like is Sun Thunder.
We're on the same one, Chris. Yep.
I thought he had no chance the way that race unfolded. It was a glacial pace last time.
What's funny? I should have guessed this, because you're a pretty big fan of Disarm, right?
Right.
And Disarm got in some traffic trouble, and Sun Thunder was right behind Disarm. And it was sort of like the traffic that was impacting Disarm and the race shape also sort of hit Sun Thunder the same way, just like he was another tier right behind them.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And his race before that was good enough to win this. So, he is the kind of horse that's trip dependent. But like I said, McPeak does really well. His horses really run at Keeneland, and this horse does need to do something in this race. They're thinking Derby with him. He's coming back kind of quick, but that race was so slow, and he didn't really have a chance to do much running. I don't think it's a problem at all. The turnaround,
I feel like McPeak, it took a lot out of him.
No, and McPeak does this all the time with success, even with his best horses. So he's one of the few trainers out there now that still don't mind running their horses every 2 or 3 weeks or once a month, even the best ones. So I think this is a time to catch Sun Thunder after that last one. You probably will get a price, and if he gets the trip, he definitely could win, I think.
Yeah, you just go through his 4 races in a row now since he's been stretched out, and he's gone 2 turns, and he's gone a mile and above. He wins impressively. Then he's in the Southwest behind Arabian Night, who has been extremely impressive the only 2 times that we've seen him. And he just goes wire to wire that day. That was also on a sloppy racetrack, and he still finished in front of nice horses like Jace's Road and Corona Bolt in there. Following that race, he's in the Risen Star. He runs a bang-up race, his career best, and you could see his speed figures are on the upswing, and they're improving. So if we're playing him off that 89 buyer speed figure to take a nice another step forward, 4 or 5 points, or just some more progression, and that would put him right there. I like looking at horses like that. And Angel of Empire came back in his next start, wins the Grade 1 Arkansas Derby. How about Two Phils, who wins the Jeff Ruby Stakes over at Turfway and earns 101 Beyer speed figure in
Right.
doing so. You know, like big races. And again, Beyers aren't the end all be all. I just sort of like using them as a talking point to show how strong some of these races come up. But I like horses like this where it all makes sense to you. Like every race that he's run.
Yeah, and that Risen Star, you could definitely say was the strongest 3-year-old prep to date. I mean, Angel of Empire came back and won impressively in the Arkansas Derby. Two Phils came back and won the Jeff Ruby impressively with big figures for both of them. You know, and you could argue Sun Thunder was just as good or better than both of those
Mm-hmm.
in that race. So, you know, there's no reason. I'm not saying it won't, it will win, or it's going to get the trip it needs to win, but it could, and the value's there. It kind
At
of
the
gets back to that
6-1
discussion.
above. Yeah, exactly. Like his chances in here to me at like anything above the 6-1 range would be really fair of his chances in here. And just not thinking there are any monsters in this race. Honestly, the
Right.
two horses that we, are going to be the short prices, like we're both a little warmer on Verifying than Tapit Trice because of the trip, but I don't think they're horses that scare you off. One that I kind of like a little bit too. I'm going to throw in a pick 5 or 2 is Scooby Quando. This horse has been only on synthetic in 3 races, and the synthetic speed figures always come back a little lighter than dirt speed figures. They just always do. But Turfway has really improved their product the last couple years. They had a huge handle year again this year. And if you watch that Battaglia back, he was really, really good that day. He was, sitting about 5 lengths off. He was in the 6th or 7th spot. Then he got shuffled back on the inside. He kind of moved back into contention, but he had traffic. He had to wait. He had no room. He took back. He angled all the way around, and he got up late for second. It's just one of those trips that I like seeing a horse overcome a whole lot. And if those speed figures are a tad low and he can transfer this over to the dirt, I'm going to throw him in on a ticket for sure. Chris, anyone else in here that you want to mention or that you might be using? What do we think about raising? I guess the horses towards the outside. Blazing Sevens, who was good as a 2-year-old, but I just didn't really find much of an excuse. I mean, he got bumped around a little bit, but he was just not in that race at all, and they just basically eased him. Now they put the blinkers back on.
Well, he's dangerous if he runs back to his 2-year-old form. So it's all about price. I have a feeling with IRAD riding and Chad Brown training, you're not going to get anything. You probably bit down, maybe
Yeah.
below the 6-1. So I don't know if there's a lot of value there, but I wouldn't be shocked if the horse won just because he was the best 2-year-old in this field right now.
Yep.
He had
He beat
one bad
Verifying.
race. Yeah.
Yep. And
He's
I think
had
I said blinkers back on, his first time blinkers for him. So maybe that could be something that perk him up a little bit and get him more focused and more involved in the race early.
Yeah. The other horse I kind of like is as another McPeak horse, Hayes Strike, who he hadn't really done much running before his last race, but his last race he really took it to the next level at Laurel. And like I said, McPeak horses tend to run at Keeneland. So, if he could run back to that last race, he's the kind that can maybe hit the board and he could be a really big price. So,
When
that's
you're looking at progression too, because I know a lot of people like to play patterns off of their sheet numbers or rag numbers or speed figures. And if you look at Hayes Strike, moving from the street sense on a sloppy track where he's behind 2 Phils who's come back and run well. And then in his next start in the Jockey Club, he takes a nice step forward and improves there. And that race is good. Instant Coffee was in there and has come back and run a couple good races following that. Then on December 26th, he's in the Gun Runner and he's just chasing Lone Speed that day. Jace's Road just gets out front. And if you look at the chart too, just cruises. Like nobody's making up any ground in that race. And the race came back pretty live. Determinedly and the winner is both came out of that race to win their next start. So you look and see the horse got beat by 8.5 lengths, but you sort of look at the way the race shaped up and nobody was passing that day. And it's actually come back pretty live, probably a little better than the speed figure would suggest. Easy toss on the January 21st race. They took a shot on the synthetic, just didn't fire, put a line right through. And then he comes back last time out with, like you said, a nice win. We don't know who he beat, but I have no problem with him in underneath spots. And if this is a spread race for you, if you're approaching this race like you don't like the 1 and the 3 and you want to use prices, I wouldn't talk you off throwing him in, Chris, if you're, talking 15, 20 to 1.
Yeah, even those races last year, third by 1 behind Instant Coffee, and like you said, second behind Two Phils. As a 2-year-old, he wasn't a bad horse, and that last race showed that he can still run, and he's on the he's on the improve. So why not? The only thing I would mention just again is I think it's really the favorite. I think Tapit Treese is going to be
Yeah,
much the favorite. Verifying's going to be a distant second choice, I think. So,
it makes him so much more playable
yeah,
in that sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
because if you can beat Tapit Treese, if they bet that horse down to like even money, and then the odds on everybody are going to go up, and you might have some really good prices on horses like some of the ones that we mentioned, Sun Thunder and Hayes Strike, and Scooby Quando is going to be a big price no matter what. But I like the way you're thinking. He's a wild card, right? You don't know what kind of horse he is on the dirt, and he did have an excuse in his last, and he has a good workout at Keeneland since. So you never know. You never know.
We're always looking for some prices, and I love listening to Chris on the podcast, on the Sport of Kings podcast, on the Bet with the Best podcast. Chris is an NHC Hall of Famer. Chris is someone that I met, gosh, already like 10, coming up on like 8, 10 years ago, talking on the Elite Racing Network about some races. And we've had a lot of fun conversations since, and you've helped steer me to many horses, many angles. I feel like I always learn a little something from you every time we talk, Chris. I know you are someone who is an advocate for the players out there. We've talked about value a lot throughout this podcast. You're always someone who is trying to find the takeout rates for tracks and let everybody know which are the best wagers to play. Hey, don't get in those high takeout pick 5s or play this lower takeout pick 4 instead. So thanks again for all that you do, man. I love following you along on Twitter because you always direct me to 1 or 2 things I didn't know before. And I love chatting the races with you. So plug your podcast one more time for everyone out there.
All right. First of all, back at you, Gino. I always love talking races with you, and thanks for inviting me on. But yeah, I've got 2 podcasts going now. I'm not quite anywhere near the Gino League of constant podcasts, but
You're doing well. You're doing well. I'm proud.
I have the with Scott Carson. We do the Sport of Kings podcast, and that's one where we take a pick 5. And we're actually going to end up covering these same races. So I'm all ready for that now. I don't have to do any more preparation. But we usually have a guest each week, and this week we'll actually have the NHC champ from this year joining us. So that'll be fun. And we every week we drop that pot on Friday, and it's a different pick 5, usually at one of the premier tracks in their premier card. And then I just started, like we mentioned before, the Bet with the Best podcast. That one probably will come out every week, although it's evergreen, so it's not really dependent on races. And that one will drop sometime tomorrow too, my 3rd one with Matt Miller, and the other 2 with Marshall Graham and Tommy Massis. You can listen to those. Like I said, they're evergreen. It's all about becoming better at betting. And then I'm on Twitter, Derby1592, Derby1592. You can follow me there, and I'm always tweeting out links to the pods and all kinds of other stuff, especially with Kentucky Derby coming around. I do a couple things, like I have a little Derby computer model that I put out there, and talk Derby as we come up to the big race, which is not that far off.
And one thing, Chris, I can guarantee, we can't guarantee a whole lot in the world of gambling. We have good days, we have bad days. But the one thing I can guarantee is that whenever I listen to you, you always have come prepped. You've always done your homework. You're ready to rock and roll. You have great reasoning, great analysis. And that's what I like as a handicapper. You're never going to hear a show where Chris comes on his show or mine or any other place you'd hear him and just say, I love the favorite in all the races all the way through. That'll never happen. And you'll always be probably led to a horse or 2 that weren't on your radar at all. So again, Chris, thanks for all the hard work. And I look forward to flipping those podcasts on. They're part of my weekly rotations too. I always flip that on and get a horse or two to throw into my pick five many times from you and Scott and your great guests. So I'll be sending you another message in about 3 or 4 weeks right before Derby, and I'll try to get you back on if you're available to talk about the big one and maybe a prep race on the undercard.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again, Gino.
Thanks so much. That's Chris Larmey there, and thanks to all of you for hanging out with us on our Keeneland All Stakes Pick 5 conversation. We have more if you need help with the Woodbine races. David Aragona helped me out with the stakes races over there. And I'll also be posting a little look at the Saturday card at Santa Anita. So whatever you need help with, we've got it taken care of on the DRF Pass